Welcome to what happened on Saturday with Marlon Kerner, off-season edition number one. Marlon, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Josh?
I am doing great. We are lucky to be a part of the Cover One College Football Network. We've talked quite a bit about, our off-season plans and the fact that we're going to chronicle things from your kind of dual, unique roles in, as a college football co-captain at Ohio State, and then your time in the NFL as a player engagement director. And we figured because our other show on the Cover One College Football Network was lucky enough to interview Jim Nagy, who was in charge of the Senior Bowl, that we would go down memory lane with our friend Marlon Kerner, co-captain of the Ohio State Buckeyes in the mid-90s, and talk about his Senior Bowl experience from the perspective of an NFL draftee, someone who knew that the Senior Bowl was going to be a big deal for him, and just to get his impressions, memories, and then maybe how it's changed from players, from the mid 90s to today. So, Marlon, just for people listening, the Senior Bowl is going to be on February 3rd, a Saturday, at Hancock Whitney Stadium on the campus of the
Right.
University of South Alabama. It's on NFL Network and ESPN. The Titans and the Jets, their assistant coaches are the head coaches for the game. Take me back to your senior year. When did the Senior Bowl get on your radar, and how big of a deal was it for you?
It was a huge deal, I think. As a senior coming out, you had two options, right? Like, so if you weren't sure where you were, if you knew you weren't going to be one of those guys in the first round draft pick or in that top 10, what generally would happen is you try to get in one of two Senior Bowls, right? You tried to either get into the Senior Bowl down in Mobile, Alabama, or you try to get to the East West Shrine Game. Like, and so those are invites only, and the East West is still being going. It's still played. I believe they play on February 1st, that Thursday, before the Senior Bowl. And so those were kind of the two options that you had as a last showcase for NFL scouts to kind of say, hey, listen, maybe my senior year didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, or maybe I'm from a smaller school and I need to show that I really can play at this level. So you got invited to one of those two games. I was fortunate enough to get invited to the Senior Bowl. And it's kind of, you don't really know, like, you don't get to say, hey, can I go play in this game? Like, they reach out to you. They
Who's
go
they?
through,
Who's they?
they have a committee or a staff, whoever select is in charge of that process of selecting who they would like to come and participate in the Senior Bowl. They will reach out to your school and kind of say, hey, we want this person to participate in the Senior Bowl. And then you have the option to say yes or no, right? So
Now,
obviously they'll go and have a kind of like setting your own draft board. Really, you have a board of players. You think, hey, this guy has some NFL talent. We want to see him in front of all the other talent around here. So you'll see some Big Ten guys, you'll see some SEC guys, you'll see some Pac-12 guys. You get representation from all of the five major conferences, and then you would sprinkle in some of those schools that they would kind of say the lower level at the FCS level now, or one double A is when I was coming out,
yeah.
right? But the FCS level now. And so you kind of sprinkle those guys in. So somebody that might have, like a Leotis McKelvin, who was a first round draft pick of the Bills, like, he would have been somebody that would have been invited to the Senior Bowl because people would want to know, is this guy as good as they say he is?
Okay.
And so once you look at all those things, you kind of set your roster. You kind of have a preliminary of guys you think that might be able to go and play. Some guys are going to get injured late, and so they can't participate. And then you would move somebody else up on that spot and say, I need another corner. And then you go down your list of corners. So you think, like, here's a group of guys we want to get. And then you would just kind of go down the line and replace those guys. So it was myself and one of my teammates, Chris Sanders. We both got selected to go to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama.
All right. So your season ends. The bowl game is over. When did you get invited? When did you find out you were invited? Do you remember?
Sometime in January. I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but sometime in January, you kind of figured out, all right, I'm going to the Senior Bowl. This is the next phase for me. And in between there, you're trying to figure out all your steps, right? Like for us, we still had some classes. I was still taking classes, so I'm trying to go to classes. I'm trying to see if I'm going to get the invite to the combine as well. So you're trying to plan all these things. You're interviewing with agents, trying to figure out who you want to sign with as an agent and what that process looks like as well, while also trying to figure out all right, well, when am I going to work out? If you've graduated already, or if you've come out early, or if you're not taking classes, then if you have an agent, he may say, hey, you should go to Florida and go train and get ready for the combine and go and get ready for these things. So they will be making accommodations for you to decide on when you're going to go, when you're going to train, because you have the Senior Bowl, or the East West Shrine Bowl game that'll play in the first week of February. You have Super Bowl, and then you have a little bit of time until you have the combine come up. So you have a little bit of time frame of where you need to go if you don't think you're running well enough, because back then it was all about the 40, which it still is. Like we still watch it. We go now watch it on NFL Network. They broadcast all the days separately, and so really you kind of get that process down of, I need to get faster, or
Sure.
my shuttle time needs to get here, or I need to get stronger, or if you're coming off some bangs and a little bit of nicks and bruises, you're trying to get a little healthy so you can get ready to. You got to show well. Like you have combine if you're going to go and get those interviews, and if you decide you're going to run there, and then if not, really what you're getting prepared for is your pro day. Everybody's going to really run on their pro day, so you have the option of deciding to run at the combine or not at the combine. And I know we'll talk about that as we get closer to the
Yep.
combine and what my experience is, but that's kind of how you lay out the calendar of what that will look like. And then
That
but the main thing now is getting ready for the Senior Bowl.
Sure. So that's an interesting calendar, and we're going to kind of follow the calendar on the show of, Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Day, Draft. Your experience both as a player and a player engagement director. So, who was setting this calendar? Did you have advice? Was it you in charge of yourself? Like when you sat down after your last game, after the bowl game, you get invited to the Senior Bowl. How many like who's helping you with this process?
The school kind of helps you with the process. They will help you with everything. You go and say, hey, I'm going to the Senior Bowl. I'm going to need shoulder pads. I'm going to need my helmet, my cleats. They help you pack your bag, get everything situated of what you're going to need to be on there. Thigh pads, elbow pads, all the things they say that you should bring, which most of us don't really wear. If you're a defensive back, you get the smallest ones that you need. I didn't wear elbow pads, gloves, anything that you might need to be prepared to play in that game, cleats, all that stuff. They're going to help you with. You take that from your school. You get all your flight arrangements all set up for you from the representative of the Senior Bowl. They tell you when you're flying, where it is, and then you get yourself to the airport.
Did
And
they pay
then
for your did they pay for you to go to the Senior Bowl? Who paid?
I didn't pay. So the Senior Bowl said, "Hey, we have an invite. Where are you flying out?" Like they talked about where you flying out. I'm flying out of Columbus, and that's it. Like, so some guys may already, if you've already graduated, you may be like, "Hey, I'm not here. I'm back at home training, or I'm here working out. But yeah, I want to come." So you get with the school, you get with everything you need, and then they take care of the arrangements of getting you down there, and getting you all set up, and then they pick you up. So that part was handled really well. You just get your flight, you get everything that you need. You have all your stuff. Back then we had a Walkman. So I had my Sony Walkman, my Sony Discman, so to
Nice.
speak. And I had my headphones, and I was lucky and fortunate enough to have somebody that I was a teammate with for 4 years. So it was a really cool experience because we went against each other in practice every day, for the last 4 years. So we kind of knew each other intimately on what our strengths were, what our weaknesses were. And Chris Sanders, and we called him Tippy Toes because literally he was a track guy. There are some guys who are track guys trying to play football, and then there's some guys who are football guys that can run track. Chris was a football guy that could run track, and super fast. But we called him Tippy Toes because his heels never hit the ground. Like literally, it looked like he walked on his tippy toes the entire time. And so super fast guy, like 4.3 40, running that 20-second 200, like extremely fast. And so really hard to guard those guys. You learn how to get yourself faster, get yourself in the right frame of mind. So I had that talent, being in a loaded receiver room, just being in college. So I had kind of like, I understand how to go and prepare myself and how to watch certain things when you get to the Senior Bowl, because all eyes are on you. It's like literally like that Tupac song, "All Eyes on Me." Every rep, one-on-one, one-on-ones with the DBs, receivers, one-on-one with the O-line, D-line, one-on-one with the linebackers, tight ends, and running backs. Like, all eyes are on you, for certain segments of the practice. And then you get ready and you have all this lead up to learning the system, a pro style system, in a week. and then having to execute that and pick up sometimes complex calls on a Saturday. And so it
Sure.
was really a big learning curve while also trying to figure out how to pick up new terminology and learn how to pick up and play maybe a different position. Like maybe you played left corner, they want you to play right corner, or in my instance, they brought a ton of corners down to the Senior Bowl of my class. So they're like, who else knows how to play safety? Hey, I can play safety. I know how to do that as well. And so you just kind of figure out what you can do and show how you can learn different positions in different spots to say I'm more valuable. They didn't ask me to do this in college, but I can do this as a player if you're thinking about somebody to bring into your organization for all the draft picks you might have. So when I was there, I believe it was the Giants coaching staff for me that was coaching our squad, and I forget who had the other squad.
All right. So you land in Mobile. You got your plane ticket. You got your boy, riding with you. You land in Mobile. You get to the hotel. How many guys were there? Do you know?
I don't know. It was a lot of guys. Like I was with who would be the standout of that class? Tyrone Poole was one of the cornerbacks that got drafted high. Derek Brooks was one of the linebackers from Florida State there because they bring all the players together. So, you have your north-south, how they break it up. And you have just all the guys are just brought in together, and they had a really cool room that you can go into. And they just had video games and snacks and stuff 24/7 where you could just really just go and unwind after practice and hang out and bond and meet guys that maybe you played against in college or saw in college on television. Like, hey, I would love to get to know that guy because you're going to end up being, some of you might cross paths and be teammates later on. And so for myself, DBs and receivers, we always hung together. And I got to become really good friends with Ken Irvin. While I was there, we just all hung out. We all were playing little games. There was a game we all played. You remember the game Off Road?
Yeah, sure
I'm gonna
do.
go back,
Yep.
lads, with the little
Yes.
wheel and
With the
everything, and
little
you're
monster
pushing on there
trucks
and
and
you're
the little
shifting in the
hill.
monster trucks.
I
Like
absolutely know it.
they had off road there, and that's all we did. Like you had ping pong, you had some
That's amazing.
foosball, you had a few video games, but we played off road. Like I don't know how many hours we played off road. That's all we did. Like between the interviews of trying to touch base with, you had scouts that would come in and want to maybe touch base with you. You had agents that wanted to set up meetings and take you out and talk to you. And so it was just a really fun experience just to kind of get down there and just be like, you know what, this is going to be really fun. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited.
Sure.
And that's really how it was. That's how you bonded with guys back then.
All right, so you get down there, you're all in the same hotel, you're all after the same goal. You're kind of competing against each other, but at the same time, you're trying to make friends and you know that you're going to cross paths with a lot of these guys either as teammates or opponents in the NFL. So kind of walk me through the week if you remember, like, how many practices did you have? Obviously I think people know who'd be listening to this show that the practices in a lot of ways are more important than the games themselves. You're doing
Right.
one-on-ones, against guys of your caliber. And then how weird was it kind of practicing / competing against guys that you have never really seen before, as opposed to, at Ohio State every day, you're competing against Chris Sanders and guys that did that, like, was that a weird experience? You're practicing, but you're also competing against guys who you might have never met, never seen before.
It wasn't weird practicing against guys that you had never met before. I think the approach is now different, right? Because you don't know what their favorite move is. You don't know how they're going to line up and what their shake is off the line, because that's the one thing you look for as a defensive back. You're always looking for keys to tell you what this guy is going to do. So in college, for those who may not be familiar with me, I went to Ohio State, and the guys in my receiver class that I had to go against every day: Joey Galloway, Chris Sanders, who I mentioned, Terry Glenn, who I went to high school with. So I had known Terry since I was in high school. Buster Tillman, D Miller. There were so many really good 5-star, 4-star receivers back when I was coming. We called them blue chip prospects, right? And sometimes parade All-Americans that was coming into the organization. And so you really just got a really good scope and a good mix of guys that were quick, some that were big. Like we had a really big receiver, and he gave me fits my freshman year, and freshman and sophomore year. While he was there, his name was Alan DeGraff and Reed, and he was just 6'4", 6'3", big, strong guy. And so that technique and that approach was different because you couldn't be too physical with him at the line of scrimmage because he was big enough to just pull you by. And then you got in a trail technique, and he had decent speed. He had really good speed. He could run too. And so if you got in a trail technique on him, it was almost going to be just a jump ball situation. And so you never wanted to put yourself in a jump ball situation with a guy that's 6'3", 6'4", because, hey, even if I have a 34-inch vertical, I'm probably going to lose this because the quarterback's going to put it up pretty high. So you learn how to play the right technique based off of the body type. And so that's what you went into the Senior Bowl going, okay, I don't know these guys. So if I'm the first guy, okay, people going to learn by watching me. But if you're not in there, one of the first couple guys, you're watching, you're looking at guys, you're taking those mental notes, kind of saying, okay, he does this. When he does this, he's doing this. And so you kind of started getting a rhythm of how certain guys like to go and how they ran their routes. And so you became accustomed to how they do certain moves, certain little nuances. And you could tell guys that went to the big time programs that were prepared for what we were about to go through. And then some of the guys who came from some of the smaller, quote unquote, I'll put it in quote unquote, some of the smaller programs that maybe the coaching wasn't up to par, where they didn't learn certain techniques and certain aspects of how to stem one way to create the space that you needed to come back inside, or stem inside to get back on the outside. So you just really started working on recognizing certain things that guys did, and then paying attention to what they were calling out, because it's always a competition, right? It's always a competition. And I think that was the first thing that Ohio State taught me was no matter what, you compete every play, no matter what practice, it's always going to be a competition. So I was prepared to go to the Senior Bowl. It was, let's go compete. And then you start looking at scouts and everybody up in the stands and everybody just watching you and taking notes. And I remember the one, you get in on Sunday, you get everything situated, and in the process, there were a couple agents that I was talking to, like, hey, are you going to Senior Bowl? Yes, I'm going to Senior Bowl. Hey, I'll see you down there. I'd love to take you to dinner. So Mobile was the first time I actually had calamari, because I had an agent that was like, have you ever had calamari? I'm like, no, I would love to try it. Great, I'll take you to dinner. We're going to go out. We'll touch base about what this experience is going to look like. I'll tell you a little bit more about me and how I can best represent you and serve you. And we'll grab some dinner. So we go, and now if you've never been to Mobile, great seafood. So anybody that's listening is like, hey, I want to try something. If you're close to Mobile, Alabama, some great seafood down there. And so we got calamari, we got some great seafood. We talked through the entire process of what it would look like for the week. And then you have practice on Monday, you have practice on Tuesday, you have practice on Wednesday, you have that last kind of practice. You kind of last like padded practice either Thursday or Friday, depending on what the schedule is going to look like. And you do have little things, little appearances you have to go to. So there's a whole lot of things that they have kind of scheduled for you. And in between that, you hang out with all the guys and play off-road and play some of the other video games that you do. And
How
so I think
many competitive reps a day do you feel like you were in at those practices?
now you're trying to make me go back. You know what? It was more like a regular practice. Like you would get a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours of practice time in. So you had a lot of reps to really try to get in. You had your normal breakdown of your individuals, where you kind of do your group stuff, walk through certain combinations. Then you always had your one-on-ones with the receivers. You always had those the competitive drills, and then you would have your 7-on-7. You get your team together, and then coaches are trying to figure out depth charts and how you match up. And so the tough part about when they get too heavy in a specific position, like that you play, like a receiver, or in my instance a corner, then what happens is they have guys that like, hey, this guy's projected to be a first round draft pick. So they're really trying to give them the reps. So in my group, there was Craig Newsome, who ended up being a first round draft pick by the Green Bay Packers, went to Arizona State. Really great guy. We got to know each other really, really well. Because that's the thing. Like you think we are all competitive, and we are. We're uber competitive guys in the moment, during the process on the field. But off the field, we were just really like guys just trying to hang out and get to know each other and be like, okay, I hope, maybe we'll cross paths. Like who you been talking to? Like who's your agent? You're trying to get all those things of why'd you choose the guy that you chose? Like, what have you seen when you talk to this organization? What are they asking you? What does this look like? What does that look like?
It's a networking event in a lot of ways for you, right?
You're building friendships, but you're also trying to figure out, if you haven't figured out an agent, well, why, who's your guy, and why did you choose that guy, and can I talk to them, and talk me through this and talk me through that, and if you haven't seen certain aspects of a defense, hey, what did he mean when he said by that? Because terminology is different, so you're trying to pick it up, and you try to use those reference points from your own experiences of, well, when he says this, oh, that's our cover this. And so you try to make those connections to make it easier for you, because the whole thing is you don't want to think, because thinking in football means you're slow. You just want to like, I know what I need to do, and it should just be a reaction. If I see this, it should automatically be a response of, he does this, I do this. And so you want to play fast. So that's when we talk about playing fast, is you're not thinking about it. You already know mentally, if he does this, I'm doing this, and it's an automatic response. And so you're trying to build that. And that's what takes the longest, because it's new. The terminology is new. The checks are new. The hand signals are a little different. So sometimes you'll talk to the coach like, hey, our cover two, we did this. Can we do that as a signal? And most coaches, yeah, I don't really care about that. Or some coaches like, no, this is how we call it. This is what this means here. And you need to pick it up and tell me you can pick up our hand signals. Because if we decide to draft you, this is what it's going to
Sure.
look like. And so those are all the things that you're dealing with there. And then you just kind of have that once you come together 7-on-7 in offense, that's where you're like, okay, I have to show that I can play at this level. And for us, we had Kerry Collins and Kyle Brady from Penn State. They were both at the Senior Bowl, and some really good receivers. And I remember the one thing that stood out for me was this, just going up and at it, and guys trying to start one way and run slants and fake like the stem outside and come back in. And I remember watching somebody beat one of the defensive backs, and I was like, okay, that won't happen to me. So a couple of reps later, try to have the same thing happen to me. And I knew it was coming, because you could just tell, like, okay, this is what they've been working on, like stem outside, break it back inside and hit a slant. And when he started shaking and not going anywhere, I was like, okay, I know it's coming. And I jammed him so solidly at the line of scrimmage and drove him back. I was like, okay, I won this rep. Like, we can go back and line up and do something different, but you didn't win this rep today. And so those are kind of like the mental reps when you're paying attention to kind of what routes they're trying to run a lot in the one-on-one drills that they're trying to practice, because they only have a certain amount of practices and time of how they want to try to attack the opposing team. And so it was really just fun to watch. And I remember for me, I had the dinner with the agent on that Sunday night. And then you're just kind of like, all right, well, what are we going to do next? And then we come to the practices, and Kerry Collins, who ended up being a first-round draft pick as well. He's like one of the premier names in that draft class and the QB class that they had there. And the way we were taught how to play at Ohio State was different than the way that the Giants wanted us to play. And the Giants wanted us to read the quarterback drop first. So they wanted you to play about 7.5 yards off the ball. And you don't take a step. You don't take anything. You stay where you are. And really, you might take a half a step. But what you're reading is the quarterback. You're reading if he does a 3-step drop. And if he does a 3-step drop, your eyes immediately go back to the receiver and locate if he's running a slant or if he's running an out. If it's a go route, you could get in his way and try to like throw that little hand out, the little chicken wing, so to speak, slow him up and turn and run and try to get into a foot race. And so I remember just thinking like, okay, this is going to be an interesting technique of how to play this. And so I kind of did what they wanted me to do. And I watched Kerry Collins drop back, set 3-step drop. Okay, first thing was, okay, got to find a receiver. Receivers running it out. And I'm looking at Kerry Collins cock that arm back. And I broke so cleanly on this out route that when he let this thing go, all you heard was ball come out. Boom. You see me break in front of the receiver on the out. I catch that ball. Yes, I didn't drop it. Catch the ball, take it back. It's a pick 6 in practice. Defense is pumped. We're pumped. And that got all the eyes like, okay, well, maybe he can play. Maybe he can play at this next level. And it also gets your own confidence there. And then
Sure.
from there on, all of a sudden you go back to your room and you've got messages galore from agent on top of 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 agent. Like, hey, great job at the Senior Bowl today. Saw your interception, saw your pick 6. Would love to talk to you. Love to talk to you here. Love to get
Did
this.
you
Hey, here's my
did
phone
you
number.
feel
So it
like
was kind of
that
cool.
did that one specific play or that practice raise your profile? Like you walk off the field that day. I mean, you're obviously a well-known commodity at that point. You were a co-captain at a high-profile school. You had a really good college career. But like you said, I mean, you were getting more run and more more messages from agents after that play, after that,
Yeah, after
standout
that play,
performance?
yes. After that performance,
Wow.
after that,
That's
especially
kind of
in
amazing.
particular that practice, everybody's like, "Hey, who is this guy?" Like pick six. Oh, he's a Big Ten guy. Oh, that's Marlon. Okay, hey, because my senior year was up and down. Like I had just a season of where I was playing to try to get to the NFL instead of just playing because I love the game. And so I had some mental errors. We had just some blown coverages. Some were my fault. 100%. I raise my hand and take full accountability for those. Some of them were not my fault. And just a communication error where we had certain checks in that really didn't make any sense for what they wanted to run against it. So you would have a guy running free. And so it's just kind of one of those things where it was the first adversity really that I had to face in my college career was kind of during that senior year where it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. I was coming off of a separated shoulder for the entire season where I couldn't bench press the entire season. The only thing I could do was close grip bench because in training camp I went for an interception and momentum carried me over and I landed on my shoulder because we weren't in pads yet. It was one of those things where you had to be you had to have so many practices before you put pads on. We were not in pads yet. And I had a grade 3 separation. Literally, like if you rub your arm across my shoulder,
Mm.
like it goes like this and dips down. And they were like, "Hey, we might have to do surgery on this." And if we have to do surgery, you're out 4 to 6 weeks. I was like, "Yeah, that's not really going to happen." And so I missed 4 days of practice, and then played an
That's
entire season with a separated shoulder. And just find like we created a pad we put on it and I just played through all
sure.
the pain, through all those things to make sure that I could play for that. So for that season, because I was like, it's really important for me to be here for this season, for the senior year.
What were your going into that Senior Bowl week? If somebody would have said to you, "Hey, you're going to be drafted in, X round," do you think that the week of practice and then the game at the Senior Bowl, do you think it helped your stock? Do you think it raised your grade or your round at all?
I wouldn't say it raised my grade. I think all you need is really one team to like you, but you don't know who's going to like you or not. I think what the Senior Bowl allows you to do is it allows you to showcase amongst maybe guys that you don't normally get to go against. It allows you to showcase the fact that because some defenses are really complex. The terminology and how they check and do certain things are really complex, and they don't make it simple. And so you're showing coaches, in particular, the coaching staff that's there, and the scouts that are coming down to watch those players, that you have the capacity to learn a new system. And you have the capacity to show that your success wasn't because you were in a
Mhm.
particular system, right? Like, so if you're a run and shoot guy and you threw for a ton of yards and you're always in drop back, well, what you want to do is show that you can take snaps from under the center, right? And that
Right.
you can kind of come back and get on the 3-step drop and get the ball out and show you can do all those things. So you try to show a different side of you that maybe they haven't seen on tape before. And so that's
Did you
why when I got to play safety, they were like, "Hey, I need some safeties." I can play safety, coach. Hey, I stayed after. Hey, I'll learn it. You tell me what you need to do. Okay, here's the terminology. Here's what we got to do. Here's the checks we make. So when they're like, "Hey, I need a safety," all right, I'm in. Like, so I got the reps at corner and at safety so that I could do both.
do you feel like there were some guys that just couldn't get it? They were in a system, or the mental aspect of that week was just too much for them. I mean, you don't have to name names or anything, but were there guys that were kind of overwhelmed by the whole process?
Absolutely. Yeah. There were guys that were overwhelmed by the process. And just, because depending on why you're there and what you're trying to prove, it can be difficult. And I think what happens is really what gets overwhelming is if it's a terminology that doesn't translate well to what you ran in college, right? So
Mhm.
if you don't have a reference points that you can say, well, their cover 4 is what we call cover 6, for example. I'm not saying that they translate like that, but you try to
Sure.
go through your mental head and say, okay, well, when they say this, we're going to do, oh, that's our cover this. And then you say, okay, well, we called it this. So when he says this, mental note, this means this for me. And so it's the same thing when you go into offense. When they say X, Y, such and such, this, well, this is our this route, or this is our type of route. And so you're trying to make those connections to a terminology that you had, so you don't have to think as long as, well, what does he mean by that?
It for people who really haven't been around the game very much and casual fans, it's almost like going to France and trying to figure out French if you only speak English, right? And you're
Yeah,
trying to piece together, hey, bonjour means hello. And you're trying to get a reference point, like you said, like elephant means truck or
yeah,
whatever, to where
pretty
you can
much.
get
Yeah,
some kind of a shortcut so that you're translating the Giants terminology and verbiage into your Ohio State terminology and verbiage. And like you said, for some guys, it's probably easier. You ran probably more pro style than some of these smaller schools probably ran, more traditional,
absolutely. Yeah.
defense. How many coverages, how many play calls like were there that week? Do you remember?
Well, the thing about it, I think if I remember correctly, there were only certain coverages you could run. You could run like cover three, you could run some cover one. There wasn't any blitzing that was allowed
Okay.
to be done. So you just could run specific zone blitzes and things like that. I think in certain situations, or I think at a certain point in the game, if you were down, then you could, I think like the last 2 minutes, you could run some blitzes, some cover zero. But they had some stipulations on what you could run, so you tried to really do some good job of disguising. And so generally, most teams, when they really want to disguise, think about the team at One Bills Drive, right? Like you always want to show a cover two shell because that's the
Hmm.
easiest way and the easiest look to make a quarterback think like, oh, they're running cover two, right? And I should be able to have this route open. And then you could drop down and do so many variations and do some things on it. Sometimes you want to show a cover three and then try to run somebody back to get to cover two, or maybe get to a cover four. And so there was a lot of things. They ran a lot of similar coverages where we would run like a cover six, where you might have four on one half and a cover two on another side. And everybody calls it a little differently. So it was just kind of trying to figure like, okay, well, when they run this, we call it this. Oh, okay, I got it. Like, and so that part was easy to really pick up for me. And I'm a visual learner, so I have, and so that's where you have to really understand yourself. And so I had the ability to really be able to look at something that was put up, because think about it, we didn't have an iPad back then, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
there's no
drawing
iPad.
plays, right? Marlon,
Like you
Marlon, that
literally
was that
had,
was me. X's and O's, and I would hold
yeah,
the sign up in the air for the scout team in the huddle, and it's literally, just a cheap little cardboard piece of
exactly.
paper with a Sharpie. That's what it was.
Exactly, that's what it is. And so I'm taking people back, because you can laugh if you're listening to this, because you had the old, think about the old Xerox copies, and you had like a binder of everything they gave you, and here's what we're going to install this today, and here's what we're going to install tomorrow. And that was that. Like they would put up coverages on the board, and you would have to go
Hmm.
to your room and look at it and figure it out, and learn what you're going to run for the day. And here's the terminology, and then we would talk through it, and walk, hey, here's this. Anybody got any questions? Okay, no. And then that's it. And then you're expected to memorize that. Now, I had a really good memory where I could look at the photo and be like, okay, I'm here. And if they get into this, I line up here. And so I could close my eyes and be like, okay, they ran it. Oh, he called this. Oh, I need to be here. But I also had a really good memory as well. So I could remember when a coach said, well, if you get in this formation, do this. And I can recall that and get that back, and bring that to recollection really easy, as a player. So it was really easy for me to kind of pick that up, just because, all right, here's the formation. Here's how they're going to run it. If they run this, here's how we check it. Safety walks out and does this. And I could, oh, okay, we got that. I can remember this. And that's it. Like I didn't have to go into the, what did he say? How did he say that? Okay. We would just talk
I
with the safeties and corners and say, "We do this, I'm gonna do this," and that
Man,
would
what
be
a
it.
what a what a tough feeling, what a helpless feeling if you're down there and you're lost mentally, before the game or during the walkthrough, and you don't have it.
Right,
That's got to feel pretty helpless going into the Saturday game, because you have so many reps as a player on a team week after week after week, and now you're going into something completely different. And boy, that would be a really helpless feeling if you know going into that game you do not have the terminology down pat, even if you know it kind of, and like you said, you're thinking that slows you down, and then you're dead on a competitive football field like that. Let's go to game day. So you get through the week, you get through all the
mhm.
practices. How many people were there? Do you remember? How many fans?
I wanna say, I think their stadium held, like, 50,000 or so.
50,000.
So
Did you
I
feel did you feel a lot of pressure on game day, or did you feel like, the practices and the entire week leading up to it was just as important as the actual game?
No, I didn't feel out of pressure on the game day. I felt more it was more everything leading up to the practices, because some guys were like, "Hey, I'm not playing in this game. Like, I tweaked my hamstring, so I'm out." Like, or I'll talk to my agent, and He says, hey, you don't need to play. Like you had a really good week. You solidified that you're going to be a first round draft pick. So I'm not playing. Some guys are like, hey, I only want to play a quarter, coach. And so you talk about all those little things that maybe might go into how much time you're going to get into the game. And then it's just kind of the feel, right? Like all coaches have their own biases on who they like, who they would love to have an ideal secondary setup with, who they wanted, safety, corner, linebacker, who they would love to play on their defensive front. And so if you're not in that rotation, you're just waiting to get your opportunity. And so you just kind of make sure you take the or make the most of all the chances and opportunities you get. I want to say I recovered a fumble there, but I did miss a tackle. I was really hard on myself because I thought it was a pretty good tackler, and I missed the guy. I had to hit a running back that came through untouched, and it was just he and I. And I'm like, okay, I'm about to hit him, and I popped him good. And I was trying to get my arms around him, a big dude, and he broke through, got that shoulder come through, and I was like, man, I'm trying to get my arm through, and like, shoot. And he ran and scored a touchdown. So I had like a plus and a minus on that part. Like,
okay.
man,
How many plays did you play?
I don't even remember. I know I played and got some reps in every every quarter. And so,
Did
because
you
you
care
also got to
about winning the
remember,
game?
like I didn't really care about winning the game.
Okay.
Obviously, you do want to win, and I want to say we did win the game if I remember correctly. But and I could be mistaken, but it was a good game as far as my part. I just wanted to make sure I perform, like whatever rep I did. I wanted to make sure I graded out properly. That was the only thing I was thinking about, just grade out. Because it's not like I'm going to get this game film, and it's not like they're going to say, hey, here's this and this and that. It was just, let me show these coaches that in case we cross paths again, which you do cross paths on the next phase at the combine, because that was going to be happening the next month. So you just really wanted to make sure you showed well, so that if somebody says, hey, I saw you at the combine, hey, nice job on this, or hey, I talked to you there a little briefly, would like to ask you some more questions about your childhood, or want to ask you about this, you answered an assessment this way, right? So you kind of go through all those things and try to make sure you just try to make sure you're prepared for the next phase of the interview process, because I understood that the Senior Bowl was really just the first step of the interview process. If you got invited, that meant they saw potential, and they had some question marks on, all right, can he play at this level, right? And then the next phase is get to the combine. Really, a lot more one-on-one conversations in the evening. You get with a lot of scouts. Sometimes if you're top guys, owners, you get with the GM, head coach, like they're going to interview you extensively, and talk to you through their process of what it is to see if they're going to make you the face of their franchise. So Senior Bowl was really just step one of the process of I'm interviewing to maybe potentially get drafted by an NFL team.
At the end of the week, at the end of the game, did you feel better about your pro prospects than you did before the week?
I felt good. I thought I played well. Obviously I wanted to have that missed tackle back.
Sure.
Because you don't want to say I missed a tackle and it led to a touchdown.
Do you
But
remember
I
the
wanted to
running
get
back's
that.
name?
I forget his name. I want to say he went to South Carolina.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. I want
You
to say
could
his name was like
you could
Brandon or
just make
something.
it up and have it be like some Hall of Famer.
No.
Maybe like
I'm pretty certain. I thought he
Jerome
went to South
Bettis or
Carolina. No, it wasn't Jerome Bettis. No,
okay.
he was a little bit
Yeah,
before me.
you could have made so you could have made that story a little bit more colorful. So, before we go here, you led with, shopping for an agent. Did you make your
Yeah.
decision about an agent that week?
I did not. No, I left that process and I let it play out completely, and I actually did not make that decision until after the combine. So for me, I wanted to be thorough, and because what happened was once my phone rang off the hook, I had all these people like, hey, let's talk about this and let's talk about that. And so you're trying to filter through the noise of let's talk about it. Like, what do you bring to the table and why should I go with you? And so you have some well-known established agents. You have some agents that are new to the game that are trying to get as many clients as they can to try to get established and well-known. And I just wanted to take my time and go through the process. And everybody was like, hey, what kind of car do you want? Like there were so many people that called me and said, hey, what kind of car would you like? Well, what's your ideal car? Like, well, back then it was a Land Cruiser. Like everybody got a Land Cruiser,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't like the Range Rovers was kind of like starting to become popular, but it was Land Cruiser is what everybody wanted, right? So I was like, well, maybe a Land Cruiser. And so I had so many people say, well, we'll go get this. go, and I'm like, well, why? Like, and so I had been taught early from a few mentors at Ohio State of nothing is free. Money is not free. And so I would just ask those questions of, well, what's the catch? Right? Like you're
Right.
gonna go and front me 50, $60,000 to go get a Land Cruiser fully loaded, tinted windows, Alpine stereo, speakers, everything in the back. What's the catch? Like, what's in it for you? And so once they got to that point, they would start stumbling around. Like, it's not hard. Just tell me what the catch is. And somebody was like, hey, if you do this, then you got to leave your money with this financial firm for 11
Oh
years. I'm like,
hell.
nah, I'm good. I'm
Oh
good. I'm
hell.
good.
Were
Nope.
you
Hey,
were
you know
you
what? I appreciate it.
interviewing
Don't call me.
were you interviewing the agents more? Did you have any of like the bigger guys kind of interviewing you? I mean, you were not a first round pick. You were not, top 10 guy. I'm imagining, the top 10, top 15, top 20 kind of have their pick of, anybody they want. Was there anybody who you didn't have access to because you weren't a high pick?
Like, I didn't have like Lee Steinberg wasn't coming and knocking on my door and saying, hey,
Okay.
because like Steinberg was the guy. If you were a quarterback back in the day, Lee Steinberg was the man. He was the
He
guy
was in
that you
Jerry
would go.
Maguire, right? He was the guy in
Yeah,
Jerry
yeah,
Maguire.
yeah. Like he was a guy, and I want to say, who's the guy that's in Miami that
Drew
got all the Miami
Rosenhaus.
guys, like
Drew
Rosenhaus, like
Rosenhaus.
that. He wasn't calling me because I was not on his level. So for me, it was more of the medium tier guys, more hometown Ohio guys, and so I had it narrowed down to a guy. They both were out of Cleveland, ironically, and one guy, and the guy I ended up choosing, his name was Neil Cornridge. And whenever I go to Cleveland, I always call him like, hey, we talk from time to day. And I had the utmost respect for Neil because, he just set me straight. And we would talk and he would say, hey, and I was in that process. Okay, went to the combine, here's going everything. And I was like, hey, Neil, everybody's calling me saying I should get a vehicle. I should get this. And he's like, you know what? Let's talk it through. Like, and he sat me down and said, hey, listen, he's like, could I front you and give you the money to go get a car? Yes, I could. Like, no problem doing that. He's like, but he's like, let me ask you a question. He's like, do you have a car now? I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, so how have you been getting around? Well, I get a ride with my friends or I just walk to class like I've been doing. He's like, yeah. He's like, when we met for dinner, he's like, you were walking back from campus, walking up. He's like, I thought you looked like a linebacker coming through. And I was like, that's kind of funny. I'm a corner. I'm really fast. Right. And so we're joking like that. He's like, but, seriously, he's like, so why would you take the money from me now? He's like, because then I've got to charge you. It's going to be a 19% interest rate because
Oof.
interest was pretty high then. He's like, so why would he's like, and you're going to pay me back on that plus interest for doing all this? Or he's like, the draft is in a month. And when you get drafted, you're going to get a statement from the NFL that says he was drafted in this round. This is the financial statement and the financial compensation that he will possibly make and earn. Because this is what the third round draft pick at this position got last
Oh,
year.
how
Like,
interesting.
and you
Okay.
can take that on your own and go get your own loan, and you don't even need me. He's like, now if you need me to co-sign, I can help you co-sign, but then you would just pay it off. He's like, and that would be it. And I was like, okay. And so as I went through the process, that's kind of the advice I was looking at. And so I was grilling guys like, well, what about this? And did I take it? Did I get some? Yes, I did get a pair of Dion's shoes from somebody who's like, hey, I'll send you some Dion's. All right, cool. I
How
appreciate
many
it.
of these how many of these guys would fit the bill of exactly what someone would think a shady agent was? Like what
A
percentage of the
lot,
guys
a
in
lot of you would not, but a lot of guys, like a lot of guys, would try to be a lot of things, and they would try to use every angle to get in. And I was like, I'm good. Like the guy I told you about, the financial advisor, go get this. I had people call me and say, "Do you know what the difference between an NFL athlete and a college athlete is?" And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. He's like about 50, 60,000 because that's what I wired in one of my clients' accounts today. I'm like, you know what? I'm good because I had already understood you gave him $50,000. What's the interest rate he's got to pay you back for it? Because it made no sense. And so I kind of had a little bit more sense going into the process, and I didn't know where I was going to get drafted. Right, like the NFL will give you a card once you go through the process, and they'll kind of tell you where your draft at is, where they project you to go. So that's why when you see guys come out and they make a decision on if they're going to come out or not, is they can go to the NFL and say, hey, based off of my body of work, where am I projected to go? And the NFL say, well, based off of your body of work, you're projected to go anywhere from this round to this round. And so you have a decision as a junior to decide if you want to come out early. And so that's why you see some juniors go back, because
Sure.
they don't like where they might be projected to fall. And so they'll just, you know what, I'll just go back and I'll work hard and I'll try to have a better season to improve my draft stock. And so that's where you
Where
talk
was
about
yours?
improving your draft stock. I was anywhere between the 3rd round and the 7th round, right? So I was
Damn,
like,
a
you're going to be a
Land
day 2 guy,
Cruiser for a seventh round pick
right? Like,
at
why would I? That's
19%
that's
interest.
their entire signing
That's
bonus.
tough. That's, I mean, yeah, and obviously you're. This goes without saying. You're a smart guy. You've got a good head on your shoulders. I am sure. Unfortunately, so many guys get
Absolutely.
completely taken advantage of by these slick, promising you the world agents who are going to give you the moon at first, but then charge you on the back end. That famously happens to a bunch of boxers. You hear all the horror
Yep.
stories of guys that end up bankrupt, and a lot of times it's not even like these guys are extravagantly spending money, but if you get linked up with the wrong guy at the beginning, man, that can set you down a path that you could have been in the NFL for 4 or 5, 6 years and end up with nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I watch guys like do all those things. And so as I did my interview process, I always had like these red flags in my own opinion. Like, okay. And so when I compared my agents, and I know we got to wrap up soon, but it's always interesting when you think about why you chose and why you went down a certain path. So everybody that I talked to, I said, hey, you know what? You're interviewing me to see if I'm a good fit as a client for you. I want to interview you. Would you
Sure.
be willing to give me a list of your clients that I could call?
Mm.
And one person was like, let me get back to you. I'll let you know. And the agent I chose, Neil, was like, yeah, I can give you a list of all my clients. A lot of them you already know and you played football with. They went to Ohio State. Cool. Can you give me names of guys that I could call? And I called a lot of guys like, hey, give me some, like, why did you choose him? And some guys like, you know what, he's great. And I remember I talked to a guy that I grew up watching in high school, Mike Lanise, and he wore number 1 at Ohio State. And we talked briefly, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about choosing Neil as an agent, and I know he represented you, and I really want to know why. Why did you choose to go with Neil? And he broke it down, and he gave me all his reasons, and then he ended it with, he's like, you know what, Marlon? He's like, I'm gonna be honest with you. He's like, and this is not a sale for you to choose Neil or anything like that. He's like, that's something you have to make your decision for. He's like, but if I had a son going through this process right now, he's like, I would absolutely tell him you have to choose Neil, and here are
There
the
you go.
reasons why. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to hear anything else. After that, I was kind of like, all right, this is it. Neil was specifically an agent. He had so much, and we talked the entire process. Like, I'm an attorney. This is what I do. I negotiate contracts. He's like, if I don't do right by you, I could lose my license to practice law. And do you think I want to lose my license?
Yeah, right.
No. He's
Right.
like, so I'm going to
Not
treat
over.
you right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm like, okay. He's like, now, he's like, and I don't do investments, because back then you had a lot of boutique firms that would be like, hey, we'll represent you for 4%, and we could do your finances for another 2%, and we could do your taxes for another
Oh
one and a half
God.
percent. And all of a sudden you're paying like 10% to this firm, and you're like, where's all my money going? And I'm like, you know what? And so that was kind of a red flag for me. I was like, well, who checks who? Right.
Right.
And so I was like, well, you could do some things and you could do that. And I was like, you know what, I'm good. And so that's what made me decide not to choose the other agent, was because it was more of a boutique firm. And I didn't really want to have, I
Sure.
wanted to be able to, like, I can call my own accountant. I don't want my accountant going across the hall to my agent and be like, hey,
Yeah, that's
get me to
messy.
sign this and get me to sign. Like, that's too much. So I was
That's
like,
that's
I wanted to have my own network and build it myself, as opposed to just trusting people to do right by me and then finding out that they didn't do right by me in the long run.
before we wrap it up. Is there one, like you mentioned you got some shoes. You mentioned the 19% car loan. Is there anything else you can remember, like a ridiculous offer that somebody gave you, or was there somebody who had like no clients? Were you ever like the first pitch for somebody that you can remember?
Yeah, yeah. There was a couple people like, "Hey, I'm new to the game." Actually, one of the guys I played with was like, "Hey, I'm trying to become an agent." He's like, I'm not trying to represent you, because we had known each other. Because he was from Columbus, so we had known each other. So he wasn't trying to represent me, but he was trying to break into it. So we just talked through that process a little bit. I do remember somebody, and I laughed because they were two separate. One was a lady, and she was kind of like, there aren't enough female agents in the world, which I said I
Okay.
agree. But she was like, I'm trying to break into this, and I would love to talk to you more. And we touched base, and she was really nice, but just not what I was looking for. And I always say to her, from people that tried to throw race into it, like, anybody that
Oh,
says,
jeez.
well, we don't have enough black agents in the world, that is true, 100% true. I was like, but what so if I choose you, I say, let's take race out of it, right? Let's take race out. And how are you going to get me drafted? Like, what can you do to make me get drafted higher? Well, and then that's where they started fumbling and started going with the,
when your only pitch is that. I mean, you're
yeah.
at that point, you're what, a 19-year-old kid. Like, I mean, honestly, you're not trying to solve the world's problems. You
No,
just
I
want to
mean,
you just want to get drafted and
I
make some
understood
money.
completely. Like, right, like I get it, right? Like, hey, you know what? There's not enough black agents. I would love to kind of work with you and show you how I can represent you. Cool. I didn't say no. Like, we can have a conversation, but I want to know what it's about, because I would tell them, like, listen, with all due respect, I understand where you're coming from, right? And during this process, have I seen a lot of black agents? I have not. So I understand what you're saying, and I understand the need to have more black representation, right? I understood that completely. But at the end of the day, I was like, money's green. Like,
Yeah.
so if
Amen.
you cannot increase my draft stock, that means you can't get me more money. So
Right.
me going with you, what's the difference between me going with the guy I'm choosing? Because
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
going to
You're
get me in
not
the same spot. Like, I'm good.
you're not in
I'm
a
good.
position at that
I'm
point to
good.
be some social justice warrior,
No, I was
coming
like,
out
I'm
of
good.
Ohio
I don't need
State.
that. I don't need that.
Yeah,
So
man,
that was it.
that's a tough pitch. I mean, I like you said, you can respect where that guy's coming from, and maybe it's his way and his foot in the door. But for a kid like you, that's not your responsibility to
No,
to be anything
I didn't need you
more
to be
than.
your meal ticket. Right. That
Yeah,
was it.
and
Like, I'm good. I'm good.
you don't need anything more than to be Marlon Kerner, cornerback going to the NFL. You got enough to deal with rather than trying to cure America's ills. That's
Right.
that's great. So this was a lot of fun. Hopefully people enjoyed the episode. I can't wait to talk to you more. As the off season goes along. I think you have so many unique perspectives and stories and insights to share with people about the process, both as a player and then your time in the front office. I just wanted to share with everybody next week. My personal friend Jay Taylor is going to be on the show. Not a household name, but somebody that you've probably seen on your TV, and I know somebody Marlon is looking very forward to talking to. Jay is the fire chief in Pearland, Texas, but more importantly for our show, he was a college football referee or official for over 20 years at the WAC, because we're all old. And then with the Big 12, and his last game, unfortunately, was the 2018 national playoff semifinal, Clemson against Notre Dame, Trevor Lawrence, that whole deal. He was the back judge for that game. He knows Nick Saban very, very well. He's got a bunch of Nick Saban stories he can share with us about being yelled at on the sideline by Nick and other coaches. And I know, Marlon, you might have a couple questions about the shoddy officiating over the
I'm
years
just
that you
saying,
might have run
we
into.
can talk about this. I mean, how many times have we heard about it just on Sundays about the officiating has been inconsistent? I want to know, why is it inconsistent and what's the trend? It's going to be fun. So tune in next week to hear
Absolutely.
from the
Yeah,
insights.
really excited to talk to him. He's a great guy. He's sings karaoke. He's a really he's got a lot of
Is
diverse.
he gonna sing on the show too?
No. We don't. That's above our pay grade. He draws some crowds there, but it's a really unique guy and a really unique story. He played college football, got into refereeing, and as we all know, refereeing is only a part-time job. So he became a fireman as well after his football days, and now he's the fire chief of a real large fire department right outside Dallas. So hopefully everybody really enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Marlon, for going down memory lane with us about the Senior Bowl. Can't wait to talk about the combine, draft process, all of that as we go. Please like and subscribe to our channel, to the Cover One College Football channel, and to our show specifically. And any final thoughts there, buddy?
No, just, hey, thank you guys for listening. It was a whirlwind, and you heard us talk about Jay and congratulate Michigan. So we'll talk a little bit at some point in time about the coaching carousel that has happened. And the altered
it's not settled
landscape
yet.
of
It
college
feels
football.
late. It feels
Yeah,
late.
yeah. I'll say it.
We're all
Michigan
waiting.
cheated. No, I'm just kidding.
We're all waiting on our guy Harbaugh.
That's the domino. That's the last domino that needs to fall, and then we'll figure out what it looks like, because it'll drastically look different if he leaves and goes to the Chargers, which the rumor mill has him going to the Chargers, and more importantly, taking both his OC and DC with him, which leaves the cupboard bare.
There's some copium. There's Marlon's copium after 0-3 the last 3 years against Ohio, against Michigan. So I love it there. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks for tuning in.